Dave Birkett, Carlos Monarrez coming in from off camera. Carlos, Wednesday, mid-December.
Where's
Lions
Matthew?
fever is hitting I don't know, what's the
A
opposite
low?
of a fever
High?
pitch?
Just a fever.
Yeah, just a fever. 3-9-1, 3 games left in the season. I guess people can be excited about that. It's almost over, right? You're almost done devoting your Sundays to Lions football if you're still doing that. Holiday
Draft pick
time,
keeps going
get ready,
higher.
tank for Tua. Play like Dung for Young, whoever you want. The Lions are in the mix for that player potentially, but we're not talking about that today. There's plenty of time to talk about that. 4.5 months ahead. Carlos, your old friend Ndamukong Suh coming to town this weekend. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Lions' second to last home game of the season. And give me your favorite Suh memory.
Oh, there were so many.
There were so many.
All right, here's a good one because
Yep.
I can say now that he's not here anymore. But so this was one of the many times that Sue did something off the field, and being responsible journalists, we had to go up there and talk to him and ask him for his comment on whatever happened, for some clarification. I don't know. I think it was a speeding ticket or something that was on a dash cam, or it was something not that big of a deal. So he sits in the corner of the locker room over by Stafford and all those guys. So I walk up to him and I'm like, "Hey, Ndamukong, hey, I got to ask you about let's just say it was a speeding ticket or whatever. We're writing about it. Just, do you have any comment about it?" and he kind of just barely looks at me. He looks down the locker room, and he sees one of the PR staff members there. And this is like his second year, I think, on the team, maybe third.
Probably third, fourth.
Well into his tenure here. He sees the guy, and he looks over to his left. Stafford,
A guy who's been there for a decade plus. By
yeah,
the way.
but he's been there the whole time with Sue. The number one guy who guides Sue around and stuff. One of the key guys. And so Sue turns to Stafford sitting right next to him. He goes, "Hey, Matt." He goes, "What's that guy's name down there?" And so Stafford just looks at him and goes, "Matt." And he goes, "Hey, Matt. And like this guy turns around and he comes walking over. And the best part too is Stafford's just watching this whole thing like, what's going on? And he says, "Hey," he goes, "I don't want to talk to him. Like, he's asking me questions." And he's all upset, and he never even answered my question. And the PR guy says, "If you don't want to talk to him, you don't have to talk to him. Just tell him you don't want to talk to him." He says, "I tried to tell him I don't want to talk about these things and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Hey, that's cool. Don't worry about it. I'm just giving you a chance to comment if you want." He's like, "I'm not talking about it," and whatever. And so I just walked away, and nothing happened. But it was just, that was the kind of weird stuff that would happen. And I know you have a favorite, my favorite of yours, but what's your favorite of your Ndamukong Suh?
No, I mean, he was a heck of a player here in Detroit.
Brilliant
obviously
player.
did lots of good things on the field. I think his relationship with the media was a tough one. I mean, he only talked once a week, and certainly we asked him about plenty of things that he didn't want to be asked about at the time. He was young in his career. So there were some of those little off the field things that we had to bring up, and I think maybe he didn't understand why we had to do some of that, but that's certainly our job. And I mean, there are so many, the accident in Portland where he went to the girl's house with the $700.
There's a 1 and 1A for me of your interactions with Sue that were my favorite.
Look, I'll say this: I had the exit interview with Sue at the end of his time in Detroit, and very thankful that he gave me that time. But I had no idea how much time I had.
No, this is boring.
How much time I had to interview him, and so that was one. That whole sit down. I don't know, Rodney White, when he was talking about Roddy White in the locker room. When he said he wasn't talking to me in his locker, and I don't know. You tell me. What am I forgetting?
The one where he told you to get out of his locker. But there was also my favorite though with you and Sue was when we were on the indoor practice field, and I don't know what it was. We were talking about draft position, and he was kind of intimating,
pick what team he was going to be.
Yeah, he could have picked what team, kind of an Eli Manning type, situation of picking where he was going to go, and he kind of just ended the press conference and starts walking off. And so Dave walks after him like, "Ndamukong, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?" And it was just like Dave walking after Sue, and all the way, probably a good 15 yards or whatever. And Sue's just ignoring him. And Dave's like, "Dave, Ndamukong, what do you mean? What do you?" It's just like someone chasing I don't know, whatever, like a paper boy for money or something.
Look, he was a very unique talent. Obviously he was. I don't think he had a lot of time for us most of the time. He was trying to build his brand and do a lot of different things. But I'll tell you what, he was. I think he was one of the more interesting guys to cover
Oh,
for that reason
fascinating,
because he was a fantastic player.
Yeah,
There are
smart.
many levels to him. Yes, obviously, and. Look, he played really well in Detroit, and I guess that's why I bring him up to start this because the numbers in Tampa, and I haven't watched a whole lot of him in Tampa, but he only has 1.5 sacks, so the numbers are kind of down, and it just we were kind of talking a little bit off the air, not much, but kind of what would Ndamukong Suh have been had he stayed in Detroit his entire career? Obviously, he took that huge contract, went to Miami, played fine in Miami, but didn't have the same sort of impact. He wasn't that same sort of cult figure, I guess, in the city. Here in Detroit, it was Sue. We had so many Sue, cheers, and people loved him, and they loved to hate him for that matter. But he had such a big impact on everything. He was trending to be, a Hall of Fame player. He was the first team All Pro 3 times in his first 5 years in Detroit, and I don't know if it was a matter of getting lost in these, the I don't know, non-football hotbeds that are Miami and Tampa, or kind of what. But he just seems like he hasn't had the same sort of impact in the second half of his career as he did in the first.
Yeah, and that was the shame of it. I think the Dolphins were definitely struggling at the time, and I think this was the Philbin time and the Richie Incognito, and there were a lot of issues with the Dolphins going on, so it really wasn't the right fit for him. And we talked about as much, that that was going to be the scary, the dangerous part for Sue is he was going to chase the money, the glam, the glitz, the South Beach, all that, or maybe go to New York, maybe whatever it is, instead of picking the team that was going to be really right for him, which ultimately really was the Lions for a while.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, look, when you're getting paid, 19 million a year or
True.
whatever he was getting,
True.
like that's a tough thing to turn down. You can't. I mean, I can never fault the man for his business decisions that he makes. I just wonder, what it would have been like, and I wonder if in a, an honest moment, if he ever sits back and wonders what it would have been like had he stayed in Detroit, the impact he would have had on the field, the love that he would have received from a community. Because if you're in Detroit, if you're in one city forever, you may be a villain to 31 other NFL teams, but in Detroit, we saw it here. Even when he was running afoul of the league, he was still beloved by a lot of people in town.
I wrote this when the last year that he was here. I called it. He was going to be gone. I wrote a column about it for Thanksgiving. We should be thankful for the time he was here because he's not going to be here. And I remember one of the very first interactions I had with him. He did a lot of promotional things on Tuesdays, their off days. So he was doing a thing with Subway, and he was doing a satellite hookup with, I think it was Justin Tuck, for someone from the Giants. They were both Subway guys. So he's waiting there, and I'm there with another reporter, and so they're waiting, and they could never get the thing to work, and the other player was late from New York. So Sue was sitting there. He did his little thing of making a sandwich for us and this and that, a little thing. But we're waiting there for about an hour. And it's just me and another reporter. He's sitting there with his sister. This is a great opportunity and we're trying to engage him in like just small talk, little chat, this and that. He would have nothing to do with us. He would just say, just kind of like ignoring us. He was on his phone. Yes, he was a young man at the time, his rookie year. But it was the kind of thing where he could have owned the city that way. He could have just embraced people more. If he'd had the personality of a Golden Tate or a Nate Burleson or someone just be a little bit more real. He would have He would have had a lot more positive press. People would have given him the benefit of the doubt in the media and fans, and that I think that would have helped a little bit because I think he felt attacked in some ways, that a lot of the things that were his own doing, but they were brought to light in the media. And then they were always the subject of discussion on talk radio and newspapers. And I think he felt like, I want to get away from this a little bit. Like, you guys aren't on my side, really. A fresh start. And sometimes that's a good thing. But he could have been, and here's the thing.
That's a good. Go ahead.
Your buddy, Dave Birkett in Ndamukong, when you retire 5 years after, you know who to call, because that call's going to be coming, Dave, about, we can't just look at the end of his career. You have to look at the beginning. And I think you're right. In an honest moment, he probably does somewhat regret, hey, maybe I could have still survived on 17 million instead of 19 million and stayed in Detroit and still played for the right kind of system and the right, whatever it is, and had a Hall of Fame career, as opposed to, now his contracts are getting cut in half because he's 32 years old and he's not as effective anymore.
Well, yeah, and look, obviously, you know, as you get older, NFL players, you
Yeah.
become less effective. But I will say this: the one point that you brought up about Sue being detached at that thing, and you experienced this too, where he, I think this story is known, or maybe I know he did it in Miami, so I know this story was told in Miami at least, that at one point when all the negativity was going on about Sue, and give him credit for this, you know, whoever set it up, his sister, whoever it was, he reached out to all of us individually, called us all. It was the springtime, and said, "Hey, you know, this is Ndamukong. You know, I wanted to see if you want to get together just to talk and sit down and, you know, I don't know if it was a get to know you session or if it was just sort of, you know, hear me out session." When I had talked to him, I was getting ready to go to the owners meeting, so we never ended up sitting down at that time for that. But you know, give him credit. That's something that not a lot of players do. And look, I think, like you said, Ndamukong's a very smart guy. And I think, you know, that was as young as he was in his career, you know, that told me a little something about him too. Not just how concerned he was about that public image, but that he would go to that length to reach out, not just to you and me, but to reporters at other, you know, publications around here. So I think there's, you know, he's a very, very interesting player, you know, very interesting guy. And, you know, you're right, Carlos, maybe, and, you know, we think about it from our angle and the football side of things, but maybe he did need to get away a little bit. Maybe not just for the money of it, but maybe he just needed to get out of the fishbowl that was Detroit, too, where every little thing that he did, you know, pulling a BB gun on a cable guy, you know, a little minor accident in Portland, you know, the speeding ticket, where all that wasn't an issue. I don't remember any of that coming up in Miami or Los Angeles, and maybe there were none of those incidents, but maybe he just needed to get away from that too for his own sake to, you know, to grow as a person too.
You know, the thing is, when you run away from problems, you know, they don't go away. I mean, I talked to reporters for a story last year when they came to town when he was at the Rams. I talked to reporters in Miami and L.A., and there were shades of what happened in Detroit where he jousted with the media, where he crossed swords. You know, it wasn't quite as flagrant. I think he calmed down. A lot of the stuff was on the field that got him bad publicity and the, you know, stomping incident, all that. He kind of toned it down, but he still didn't have a great relationship with the media in either town. Not as bad as it was in Detroit, but and he does get credit for, you know, I mean, he talked to us. I mean, to be honest, I think it was the last year right before he knew he was going to go to free agency. He wanted to clean up his image. So it was self-serving to some extent, but at least he made the effort to reach out. I sat down with him for a couple hours, you know, and and that was the thing. The two big wastes were that he was smart. He should have let more of his personality shine through. I offered to him, I know he did this on Instagram, whatever. He talked about how he'd make he and his sister would have like pancakes on Tuesdays or something. And I told him, I was like, hey, I'll come and hang out with you guys on Tuesdays. We'll have a videographer out there. It'll be kind of a fun, different look at you away from the field, and it'll make you more human and make you, you know, whatever. And he was like, oh yeah, maybe. It never happened, you know. So it's like, we're trying to help you kind of work with your image, you know, image of who you are. And you know, he only kind of went halfway, you know. And he was a player as a football fan. I enjoyed watching him play, and I really wanted him to play here all his whole career. I come from a different era when guys stuck with their teams, you know, and I always liked the Isermans, the Lidstroms. This is Hockey Dave, by the way. Those kind of guys who stuck with the team forever. I like when they're, you know, Alan Trammell. They played their whole career. There's something to that. You know, you're beloved by your team, and no, let's face it too.
You're soft and sentimental, Carlos.
I'm soft and sentimental. I mean, I knew it was going to be. I thought, honestly, I thought he'd have a lot more success. You know, not a lot more, but as much success initially for the next few years after he left. And I was like, wow, it really is disappointing that it just didn't work out for him. Just a shame.
Well, you know, we'll see him in action this week. I'm sure he'll be excited to come back and hear the soos or boos or whatever it's going to be that fuels him as he chases after a Lions quarterback on the field that he played so many games
Can
here
I
now.
say one extra thing?
No,
sorry,
you cannot.
Sorry to interrupt you, but when he came back from the Rams last year, there were so many people who wanted to talk to him from Detroit that they had to bring him outside of the locker room, outside of the visitors' locker room, and have a press conference. I mean, it was like 5-6 people deep. And he remembered some of the reporters and everything. And I think that's the kind of thing that makes a player think in the back of their mind sometimes, maybe I should have stayed here. Maybe there was so much. They don't really realize it until after they're gone and all that stuff. But
Well, yeah, I think a lot of players keep, you know, media keep everyone at arm's length, and he certainly did, but he definitely showed some, you know, openness, willingness to do that too, whatever the reasons. So he's missed here in Detroit. It'd be interesting to see him this week. The other player we wanted to talk about real quick, Marvin Jones. Just his season is over. He was having a pretty good year, Carlos. I mean,
Yep.
led the Lions in receptions. He was just shy of a career high in receptions and in touchdowns. Look, on the field, whatever. The Lions have 3 games left. They're going to go with Chris Lacey and whoever else there. Yeah, your guy. Kenny Galladay. I'm sure he'll get a lot of catches, right, David Blau. That it doesn't really matter on the field, I guess. But let's just talk about what comes next for Marv, because I think Marv, where last year, just from afar, I mean, there were questions about how he was going to fit into Matt Patricia's system and how long he would be a Lion. And I think as you watched him play this year, there were none of those questions. I mean, Marv looked like he was having one of the best seasons of his career. And if you hear Matt Patricia talk, I mean, he certainly appreciated the work that Marvin put in on the practice field, in the locker room, everything that he did, this year to become the player that he did. So Marv has 1 year left on his deal. I think he can still be an important part of this offense going forward. I mean, look, the Lions are going to have to address the receiver position at some point, but I think Marv did enough this year that I still, would expect him, excuse me, to have a big role on this team going forward, I guess.
Yeah, it would make sense. I mean, the offense has been the one, shining spot on the team this year. You want to disrupt that as little as possible. If someone comes knocking on your door for a first-round pick offer or something from Marvin Jones, or maybe even a high second, you have to listen to that. But I think, I mean, he should. That aside, if you don't get a really good offer, for him, a great offer, you should keep him. He and Galladay, and I don't know about Amendola, even Amendola. I mean, that's a pretty decent trio. And if T.J. Hawkinson comes back, and I would try to disrupt that as little as. I think the running back position is more of a area of a concern, but the receivers been pretty good.
No, I think that's a big reason why the offense, was as good as it was this year. And, this is coming from a guy who, 11 months ago in January, I think I wrote something predicting that, hey, maybe they'll trade Marv, and then, even at the trade deadline this year, I know there were some rumblings about, hey, what would the Lions do with Marv, because receivers across the league were getting, so much value on the trade market. But again, I think Marv, he did everything he was asked to do this year, and I think for that reason, you can look at him as still being a long-term part of this offense, a viable player going forward. So he will hurt them on the field not having them, though. Again, you've lost 6 straight at this point, so take that with a grain of salt, I guess, as to how much it's going to. Or what impact it's going to have on the Lions' record and what they do these last 3 games.
How old is Marvin Jones?
29, I think. I can double check that as you're talking here. I'm going to let you.
So that is one thing. It's not the prime age for someone. I mean, it's not like he's Julio Jones or someone like that. where he's been a difference maker his whole career and everything. I mean, he's still definitely. I think he has a lot more value for the Lions than he might. I mean, people probably offer. They're going to lowball Lions with 5th rounders.
Look, I mean, think about it. Not to interrupt, but Emmanuel Sanders, what did he get, a 2nd or 3rd round pick? Mohamed Sanu from the Patriots, 2nd round pick, right? So I mean, that's the going rate for receivers right now. Good receivers. Marvin, look, Emmanuel Sanders is a good player, but Marvin was having as good a year as any of those guys. It doesn't have as much control as Sanu, and that's why the Patriots maybe gave up as much as they did. But I mean, look. Certainly, the value would be there for the Lions, I think, if they wanted to shop him. But given what they accomplished on offense with him a part of that this year, as good as that offense looked with him, Kenny Galladay, Danny, you mentioned him, Hawkinson, everybody at times, Matthew Stafford, if he comes back healthy, this offense should be a strength going forward, 2020 and beyond.
And this is this assuming that Patricia and Quinn are back, or does it even matter? No matter who you are, if you're a new GM and new coach.
Yeah, I mean. Look, I think that's up for discussion. Then you see what regime comes in, but I think the idea is to keep good players, not always get rid of them. And so it depends what Matt Patricia didn't want to use the word rebuild today. Somebody asked him, I think Stoney had asked him, are you in a rebuild right now? And he said, you can parse the English language however you want. So he didn't want to use that word rebuild. I mean, if they see this as being a team that, can compete for a championship next year, whoever the they is, then, you need Marvin to be a part of that. Yeah. If you think you're a year away, if you think you need to do some retooling, then maybe you let Marvin go to a contender. But again, I think Marvin's played well this year, and, that's to his credit. And I think both him and Kenny Galladay, that's a nice little 1-2 punch that they have. Amendola's a free agent after the season, so who knows what happens there. But Kenny Galladay should get a new contract at some point. Marvin Jones, that's a pretty good 1-2 punch in the NFL.
That's one of the things that
he's 29 right now, by the way, so he'll turn 30 in March.
That's one of the depressing parts about like everybody just likes to see kind of things blown up and regimes. Everybody blow out the whole thing, get rid of him, and blow it up, and and it's like you have to think, well, what do they do with Bevel? Like he's the one guy who should be retained, but if you bring in a new coach, a new GM, they should get rid of the OC and hire their own people and everything. What does that mean? Well, maybe the new head coach is a defensive-oriented coach, and that defense was terrible this year, so we've got to stockpile draft picks, get as many assets as we can, use those picks, go get some really good defensive talent, whatever. You never know what the philosophy is going to be. So then what happens to the offense next year? The one thing you could kind of count on going forward. So that's there. It's not just as easy as, all right, we blew it all up. We're all starting over. It's all fun.
You had to bring up them blowing everything out again, right? We were trying to avoid that for 1 week. There's been enough talk of that already. There will be enough talk of that over the next 2 weeks. So we're going to stay away from that.
Yeah. Well, no, I just think it makes it complicated because of the Bevel question. So,
yeah. All right. So again, look, Tampa coming to town this week.
Hot Tampa. You're hot. You're Buccaneers.
They've won a couple.
Straight.
Yeah, they've won 3 straight.
4 out of 5.
Good offense.
How dare you?
Jameis, captain turnover. Winston at quarterback over there.
Second highest depth of target behind your friend of mine, Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
1.6 yards. But he throws it away. He gives it away a lot too.
A lot of turnovers. We'll talk about that a little bit more Friday. That'll be our game prediction video as always. Until then, that'll do it from out here in Allen Park. For Carlos Monarrez, I'm Dave Birkett, Freep.com.